Hi everyone, my name is Cynthia. Let's talk books. Today I want to do a review of The Famished Road by Ben Okri. This was a fantastic book that I had never heard about until a couple of months ago when my friend in Korea suggested we buddy read it, and I said yes, we're going to try to read books from all over the world, so kind of go on a world tour via literature. And because this is a Nigerian book, I thought it would be perfect for our little project. It also won the Man Booker Prize, and I don't know then where I have been because I had not heard of this book. But let's see, what can I tell you about this book? Other than it is so good, I highly recommend it. But it's probably not going to be for everyone. In terms of plot, you're following Asaro, who is a spirit child. The plot is cyclical, so I'm not going to say too much and maybe just describe a little bit of the cyclical nature of it. This is a spirit who, or before the child is born, Asaro was part of this spiritual collective. This pact was made amongst these spirits where they'd agreed not to be born, and this was very clear. And so it always the human the physical mother goes through a pregnancy, experiences miscarriage or stillbirth, something of that sort. These spirits are never born, except Asaro has chosen to actually be born. He's actually born. Why? It's a little complex. And in the story, we see as the child is sometimes in the physical world and then sometimes steps into the spiritual world. There are particular times at which this happens. It's usually Asaro running away, and in the running or being lost is when he is able to enter the spirit world. Again, I don't consider this a spoiler because you need to know going in that this is very much a book about spirits, about the spirit world, and about the real physical world versus the real spiritual world. Both of these worlds are very real in the story, and sometimes for the reader there's not a clear always line of okay, this is the physical world, this is the spiritual world. Asaro crosses those lines, and it's only once the crossing has happened that we know that it has happened. Then he's trying to run away from the spirits that he had formed the pact with, who are trying to just get him back. So sometimes that occurs in the physical world, sometimes in the spiritual world, and then Asaro kind of finding his path back to his mother and father in the physical world. And that kind of story cycles through. There was a point halfway through the book in which my friend and I told my friend, okay, is this kid just going to keep getting lost? And why do the parents even let him out of his sight? They need to just lock him in, keep him supervised at all times. But that's not quite how it works, and that's not what the story is. The story needs to continue in this cyclical manner. So one of the major themes then is this idea of what is life and what is the meaning of life, especially in connection with the spiritual world, because the spiritual world in this book, like I said, is very much real. It's not imagined, it's not a metaphor. I spent a large part of the beginning of the story, I think, really trying to decide if what was being described as spiritual in the spirit world was a metaphor, because there are times where it seems clear it can function as a metaphor, but is it a metaphor? You can decide for yourself. I think that because this is based on Nigerian traditions, that the idea is that no, this is not a spiritual world like we think of in the Judeo-Christian tradition. This is a very, there are some similarities, but it's a very different kind of relationship with the spiritual and the spirit world. One that I deeply, deeply enjoyed, especially because Okri's writing is absolutely beautiful. and in a way that's very, that at least for me was very understandable. I can't claim to have understood everything in this book because there are tons of layers, and obviously as somebody who is not Nigerian and is not super familiar with Nigerian beliefs, there are things in here that are culturally just not accessible for me, but it was understandable enough in a way that other books are not. Like, I've recently read other books that just felt like completely inaccessible, or very nearly completely inaccessible, and this one felt like it was accessible, but the writing was still quite poetic and quite beautiful. And this is the kind of like beautiful writing that is most beautiful and best for me. I need writing to be accessible ultimately, because sometimes I encounter really beautiful poetic writing that are just like, I can't read it, this is, or this is just not accessible. There's a barrier there for me that I can't always penetrate, and Okri's writing was not that way. It was completely accessible to me, but it's something that you might want to think about if you don't tend to like that kind of very lyrical writing. You might want to read a sample before you really dig into the Famished Road. The other very clear theme here is that of roads. Like, what are roads? Where do they take us? How do we experience them? What do we know about the roads we're in? Really, how much do we need to know and need to understand about roads and destinations? That was amazing. Like, and you don't fully get that theme, I felt, until about halfway or 3/4 of the way in. There's a chapter that just like the light bulb goes off. Like, or at least it did for me. I felt like, okay, I didn't really fully understand that theme in the title until that chapter, and then the light bulb went off on top of my head, and I was like, ha, I see. Brilliant. And this is the kind of thing that I really love, and why I really love this book. Like, Okri takes you on this journey, and if you haven't fully understood certain things, you do reach the point at which he makes them clear to you. And I really enjoyed that. And yet, like, let me talk a little bit about the ending without spoiling anything. The whole time, I was negotiating with certain themes in the story, and I felt like, okay, well, the story is going to have to answer some things for me. Otherwise, this will feel like a letdown. And it did not. To a large extent, it was a little bit of a letdown for me because it's a trilogy. This is a trilogy, and I did not know that going in. Yet, there is enough of an ending in this book that I felt satisfied, right? Like, I felt satisfied. It's just that trilogy element of like knowing it's a trilogy for me that I'm like, oh, well, now I don't know the full story until I read the next books, and I don't want to do that right away because this is the kind of book that requires a lot of attention from its reader. And I'm about to start my fall semester, and usually while I'm teaching, I tend to avoid these kinds of deeper, kind of more strenuous books. And also, like, there's this emotional journey that you go on with these kinds of books that's heavy, right? And I'm not ready to keep going, like, to remain in this world, basically. I hope that makes some sort of sense. That I kind of need a break from this emotional journey of the Famished Road before I can dig in. But I do think that people that pick it up should know that it is a trilogy, and while there is an ending to this one, it's not going to be a cliffhanger or anything like that. It's not meant to be the end of the story. So that that is there. I should also talk about some of the content warnings for this book. There is violence, there is physical abuse of minors, there is a lot of discussion of poverty. That's not really necessarily even a content warning, but a lot of the violence is like familial violence, community violence in there. And so you should be aware of that. That the way in which Okri writes about these things, though, just I'm like, it's just brilliant. Like, and I can't fully describe them. You almost have to read them so that you know what I'm talking about. But it's definitely there. The characters in here are so vivid and so rich. Days in which I was reading this book before bed, I ended up like kind of dreaming in this world, and that's actually quite amazing. I tend to have very vivid and lucid dreams, and so it was one of those things that at the end I was like, okay, I need to just finish reading this book because I'm so in this mental state and I need to snap out of it a little bit. Anyways, I can go on and on about all the amazing layers in this book, but I'm gonna stop here. I'm like, and I haven't even talked about like the political themes, the familial themes, the friendship theme. But I'm gonna have to let you discover those on your own if you end up reading this book, or if you have read this book, tell me what stood out to you the most, because I think it's kind of hard to pick, but I'm sure something stood out to you the most, and I'd love to talk about some of these other themes down in the comments section. So thank you so much for watching this video, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.